This meeting is being recorded.
Cort, how are you, man? Thanks so much for making some time for us.
Todd, my pleasure. It's always good to sit down with you and connect.
Well, as I told you before, I get the good fortune to teach a class on healthcare strategy at the University of Louisville in the MBA program. And I invite a few of my friends who are really smart and good leaders in healthcare to give some insights to the class. Because they'll obviously read a couple books and do a couple projects, and those will all be really great. But I like to mix that with the opportunity for them to learn from really smart people, not just what they're doing, but how they got where they're at, and also, what's the realities of working in healthcare when you're really leading strategy for different types of organizations. And your organization is a little bit different than than I would say is what they would normally run across. And so I was especially excited that you would be willing to share some insights. So thanks again for that. And we'll start with a softball question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and not just you, but what role you play in the company, and more like the kind of the mission, vision, services. How much impact do you make in those sort of things?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for all those kind words. I was going to say you couldn't find all your smart friends, so I'll fill in today. So my name is Cort Bush. I'm a husband of over 20 years to a beautiful wife, Ashley. We have two sons, Luke, who is 17, almost 18, senior in high school. And then our youngest son, Isaac, is a sophomore in high school, 15, almost 16. So we're in the throes of that. Lots going on, lots of challenges, but it's been very rewarding. They're both good boys, so it's been a blessing. So first and foremost, my faith, and then my role in the family. And then that really does kind of spill over into the way we approach a lot of what we do with our particular organization, QHR Health, which is a group that supports rural and community hospitals across the country. We're very relationally driven, very family network driven, taking on a lot of the needs of these communities across the country. For ourselves to fit into our own strategic planning and so forth. So I'll unpack the organization a little bit, but as we go along. But my role in there is, my title's Vice President of Business Development, but that takes on a more strategic growth role. And because as we're serving the hospitals, we've got a lot of different ways we're needing to look at things. We're needing to look community forward. What are needs and pain points and solutions that particular community needs? And then when you consider the local healthcare within that community, how do we empower them to go out and meet those needs? So you're having to have a business mind, a little bit of an entrepreneurial mind, a hospital ops mind, and a ton of strategic planning all the way around. So I work hand in glove with all of the strategic planning and initiatives and so forth, and then coming up with solutions to go out and execute on those plans.
So about how many people work in QHR? And it sounds like you all deliver, products and services to different service lines within rural hospitals. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. So we've got about 500 employees. We're rapidly growing. We work with about 200 independent hospitals in around 42 states across the country. Our goal is to not own the hospitals. We want to keep the ownership local. It's typically going to be in a nonprofit situation, county owned, county governed. And that way we can keep the decision making local, keep that autonomy of what's needed for that healthcare system, keep the autonomy so that they're making what they feel are the best decisions for their community peers, because these community boards and healthcare governing bodies are made up of local leaders. Mm-hmm. And so by allowing them to keep that level of autonomy and decision making there, they don't have to worry about a corporate center managing a P&L 1,000 miles away and maybe making decisions that are great for the corporate veil, but not necessarily ideal for that community. Now, the trade-off, the challenge of that, so that's the beauty of it. And that's really part of the mission of it, strengthening independent community healthcare. That's our mission statement. The challenge of that is, in today's environment, you really do need a level of scale, though. And so what we work to do is build out really powerful scaled shared services that have enterprise type leverage, enterprise capability and efficiency, and all the other economies of scale that you would really need in today's environment to stay relevant, to stay financially viable, and so forth, and offer those to the hospital, but again, without rolling them up into some owned corporate setting or even some IDN managed setting where they lose a little bit of that local autonomy in decision making.
Well, I would think, I would think that would also imply, when you talk about scale, the first thing that came to my mind after that was expertise. And I know just from my personal experiences how challenging it can be to find really high level talented people and keep them in rural communities, especially the smaller ones. Is that something that you all also help with when you're working with one of your hospital partners?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great point. In many of these communities and rural settings, it is hard to recruit the type of talent that they're going to need, even if it's non-clinical.
Yeah.
And so by bringing in some of these services, whether it's revenue cycle, which we do, we operate revenue cycle services, or whether it is supporting them with a very thorough and informed and data-rich strategic plan, they're going to struggle to find all the resources potentially in that local community more times than not. So we bring in that level of expertise, and also because of our size, it enables us to recruit and offer benefits to individuals. Currently and historically, we do not do clinical services for hospitals. We stay out of the clinical side of things, but all the other support services you can think of, from supply chain management, if not even staffing, some of the administrative suite, again, revenue cycle. And so we're expanding those services into other things.
I think that's going to be more and more critical, and as we look at the great resignation and everything that's happened in our country, and knowing that there was so much of our really high expertise people who were in retirement phase anyway. Right. So, it's going to become equally as important for us to make sure that we've got pipelines to talent, to institutions like rural institutions. And so I commend you for that, because it's really not, it can be a labor of love, I imagine, at times, but it also is something that if you've got the right people on board, they don't even have to be full-time there, in my mind. I mean, knowing some of the stuff that I've dealt with in the rural communities, even if they could get them 2 or 3 days a week, or it's almost like they just need somebody who's got some thought process to help tutor the next generation of leaders for that organization and get them through that. Is that kind of something that you guys have experienced also?
With that, in fact, I'll give you a great anecdote relative to that. You're spot on. In virtual CIO work, we will staff up CIOs, chief information officers, who are well-trained, seasoned, a good backdrop of expertise, have seen the healthcare industry from multiple different angles, not necessarily in just one area through one purview. They've got a really good lens of what's going on at an industry level, but also how to maybe operationalize and execute that even at a micro level. They're at a particular community hospital or whatnot. But by us staffing that and allowing that virtual CIO to support 5 or even 6 hospitals is handing over a level of expertise that's probably not available within that community. And what it really doesn't do, to your point, I think also doesn't unseat any of the staff. It's really a mentoring element. And, within a particular hospital, their entire IT strategy might be what EMR they're going to use.
Right.
And it
Right.
runs so much deeper and more diverse and more broad spectrum approach than that, on not just device management, software management, and so forth, but how are we equipping the hospital to engage with patients the way they're engaging today? And so you better have a really, really good plan in mind when you go about executing some of those things.
Well, the other thing I think of with all the stories and having been in a company where this actually came about, cybersecurity has to be critical there. I mean, because, I was with the company Trilogy Health Services for 10 years, and we got hit by a cyber attack, and it basically closed us down for, almost 60 days from a standpoint of our business side. Fortunately, we had bifurcated off the medical side, the clinical side, so it didn't impact our EMR, but it did impact the business and our emails and everything like that. And it was 60 days before we got really back up to speed. And so those rural communities can't afford not to have systems in place, because there's no place else to go. I mean, in our case, there were probably other facilities down the street should we need to move people from a safety standpoint. But fortunately, we didn't need to do that. But at the same time, I mean, there's no place else to go in some of those communities. You're it.
That's exactly right. So all the security measures, understanding how to get ahead of those and not just be in reactive mode.
Right.
And some forward thinking, some forward planning, and smart investment relative to it. It can't be all duct tape and zip ties as you go along. So yeah, that's just but you're exactly right. So if we staff those types of experts, we're not only meeting the needs with a very high level of expertise and capability and bandwidth, we're doing some mentoring and training and influencing at that local level. And then we're better preparing them for all these crazy bends in the road that are happening at the broader level of the healthcare industry and all the way down into our local communities. It's changing quickly, for sure.
So that leads me to a question about, how in the world did you get connected here? How, what's a path to get to where you're at today, Cort? I mean, because it seems pretty unique, and you seem very fortunate to be in that role. And so,
blessed beyond what I deserve, without question. I'll steal that line from Dave Ramsey. Yeah. And yeah, it's a unique path. I guess one thing you could say is living in Nashville is an interesting place if there's an interest in healthcare. And not only because of, yes, it's the headquarters of really kind of the for-profit health system headquarters of the country, with HCA, Community Health Systems, LifePoint, Ardent, and the list goes on, right? But that's thrown off so many other things. Like our HCA started our company 40 years ago. And because HCA didn't always own every hospital they worked with, they had a management arm. And so, but it started in small business for me. So I did not cut my teeth in business in the corporate setting. I worked for a family owned and operated business in just south of Nashville that while I was there, and one of their early hires experienced exponential growth in international trade and supply chain management. Got pretty good at it, and gained a little bit of credibility, and working really, really hard and understanding some things that were going on in the global trade environment and all the global supply chain challenges and opportunities. And healthcare was, and still is to this day, but tends to have pretty routine cycles on supply chain trends, challenges and opportunities. And so cutting my teeth in that kind of introduced me to some needs with healthcare distribution companies here, again, based here out of Nashville. And from there, then once I got into the healthcare scene with a specific expertise coming in, and that was around supply chain and if not, global sourcing when and where that was needed or applicable and so forth. Coming in with a very specific expertise and bringing that into the healthcare world was all that I needed to not only supplant myself in kind of the ecosystem and in the network, but also provide some value. And then from there, you just begin to learn and take on so much more if you just stay open-minded, remain a good listener, and be relationally driven. Don't be transactionally driven. And so I tried to be a really good steward of those relationships as I found myself, easing and wading into those healthcare waters to the point where one of my mentors in the healthcare space became CEO of where I am today, QHR Health. Yeah. And then knowing that entrepreneurial mind, but that also that spirit of being willing to listen and forge authentic, meaningful relationships, he said, I've got to have that type of presence within our business and strategic growth initiatives when working with these community hospitals, because you cannot get lost in the masses when you work with a community hospital. These are very intimate settings. And so relationships are key. So relationships and being a good steward of those in that small business setting, migrating into healthcare, allowing that really to kind of be the spirit behind everything that I do. And then now realizing how important that is when you're working in a very intimate community healthcare setting, because you don't have millions of people to go get lost in, or 5 or 6 other big tertiary hospitals or IDNs to go. Everything is right there, and it's all very close and personal. So.
Yeah. And I suspect that it's not just that they're small. The people that are in there, it's not a lot of it. There's not a huge bureaucracy there either. I think about my experience at Norton, and there was a lot of people in Norton, and I won't say a huge bureaucracy, but there was a layer of bureaucracy in it that meant that you had to find the right person, and that person might be 3 layers down. But my guess is that in a rural, hospital scene, there's not as many layers that you have to get down. So if you don't go to the right person and build a relationship with the right person, you can't make it up, because there is not somebody above them usually that, and your reputation's probably even more important there than it would be if you had more layers.
Oh, you nailed it. It's just so close. I mean, for the sake of the audience, whoever's listening to this, Norton will have departmental spend budgets that are more annually in dollars than some of our hospitals are in net revenue.
Oh, okay.
So, that's the scaling at times. Not all of them, but that's on the smaller scale, but in some. So yeah, everybody's one conversation away from the CEO, and from there, the governing board. We, again, also intimate community settings. You have this board of directors that are either appointed or voted even out of the community, and the CEO, CFO, and that's about usually the extent of the C-suite as well. A CEO and a CFO pretty much starts and finishes there. So,
okay.
Yep.
Well, I was thinking, do you have an example of kind of a recent or even current strategic initiative that you're involved with that you could share with us?
Yes, we made a very strategic and intentional plan to further partner with Health Trust Purchasing Group, a big group buying organization here in Nashville. We've been partnered with them for years. We renewed, recommitted, and wanted to create, some people call them jump teams, other people call them tiger teams. We called ours impact teams, so that we could not only take that portfolio of buying leverage and really best in nation pricing and make it available to the community hospitals. But there again, it's not just about the availability, it's about the utilization, responding, and because we don't own these hospitals, we can't push it. We have to pull them into really good process, pull them into really good actions and buying decisions and so forth. So we created these impact teams. Well, our planning and execution of that was taking place as we were all of a sudden finding ourselves in the pandemic.
Oh, okay. All right.
And those impact teams or jump teams, depending on, the vernacular of your
Yeah.
organization, were already set up to be able to respond to these regional challenges. Well, what did we have in regional, really national challenges, but that we could do on a regional focus? Masks,
Yeah.
ventilators, face
Gloves.
shield,
Yes.
gloves, all the
Oh,
PPE
yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we began that initiative prior to the pandemic. And because of that, we had some agility and some team focus in different parts of the country that were able to respond quickly to these challenges who could have ever anticipated. And so through that, the outcome of that was Health Trust in 2020 gave us their Operational Excellence Award.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
because of how that all played out and so forth. So that's a kind of a one that the entire organization was really, really proud of. But more than anything, what turned out to be desperately needed.
Hmm.
It's hard for a big hospital to get stuff, so you can imagine how difficult it is for a smaller hospital in a hard to get to area.
Well, yeah, and I think to get back to your point from your expertise that you brought into the company, you were, you had that global supply chain expertise, and that I imagine became, an asset to you to know what you could and couldn't do most likely because of that experience. Where it's when it's easy, when supply chain is, when things are accessible, we take for granted what it is, but we all know that not just during COVID, but even right now, the supply chain is just, I mean, it's kind of dysfunctional, frankly.
Very much
And
so.
it's not just healthcare. I mean, it's all over the place. And so that expertise, boy, you got to be even more valuable than ever, Cort. I mean, you might be my new best friend. And so, when you're talking about those things, have you had an initiative here recently that you've encountered some obstacles or challenges, and how did you go about overcoming those? Obviously we could talk about the pandemic, but I'm thinking about something that's more relatable to something that might happen that was smaller than a pandemic happening. Have you
Sure.
got any thoughts about an initiative that you might have faced, a challenge or an obstacle over here, and he's like, okay, here's how we had to pivot around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we've grown as a company, and we're expanding our services and our capabilities and so forth, within that does come some growing pains,
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the natural occurring and following challenges and stumbling blocks and so forth that size and scale can bring. Um, and so the left hand may not know what the right hand's doing all of a sudden, or that department starts to become a little bit siloed and bucketed versus this department. And we really, really can't, we can't function in that way because, and if we're being honest, hospitals tend to function in that way sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
They're inside the four walls, if you will. So when we come in with these different services that are there to empower them, enable them, and so forth, we've got to be cross communicative. We have to be, um, um, very on the same page and very aligned and very symbiotic in the different things. And so I think going towards this approach where we will be more of these leaner businesses within the broader structure, as opposed to just being one big departmental organization, corporate organization, yields some ownership in those different businesses. And folks take on those as more like a small business
Hmm.
that wants to partner with the other businesses, which are really their peers and their colleagues and so forth. And I think just driving that strategic plan that we want to have those types of lean managed business units, not departments,
Right.
And then when you come in, don't look at yourself as a department head, look at yourself as the CEO of that business unit, and go about all the different things with kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, collaborating, cross communicating, staying on the same page, recognizing that you need the help and so forth. We've seen us now begin to better communicate, better support our hospitals. If this guy doesn't know what that guy's doing, we may have a lot of redundancy and support. Hey, hospital, we need, 20 files of data. Well, if one person gets those 20 files of data, 5 of them may be needed over here, and they go ask for them as well. That becomes an issue. It looks like we don't have our stuff together as the hospital.
Right.
I think shifting that organizational structure which was very intentional, very strategic. Probably not unlike some of the inspiration from what we did in our supply chain Tiger team approach, impact team approach, has really been a smart plan as we've continued to grow and adding on a lot of individuals. In 2019, January, when our CEO currently took over the company, we were at about 140 employees.
Whoa,
So
that's some, nice growth there.
when you grow from that to right now, currently just under 500, with some other things going on that could see that exponentially grow in the not so distant future, we're going to have to remain very aligned, very, very lean, lots of cross pollination, a lot of synergy, and synthesize all those different focuses into one broader value delivery.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think you made another point that I think, I want to make sure that the class catches that, when you talked about your example around a strategy and, the emphasis that you took on the partnership with Health Trust, and some of the other underlying things that you've said, I think that, it's in how important are partnerships to you guys? And, as you're thinking, not just in your current business, but you're implying that, hey, there's some potential exponential growth, when you look at that, and those will likely have some new programs and some new initiatives type of things, how important are partners in implementing those type of initiatives?
Very, very important, because you're not going to be able to do everything. You want to do in as much as makes sense for your organization. The hospitals do need a lot of help, which is why they work with so many different vendors. We want to consolidate that, streamline that, and so forth. Probably too many vendors that are tripping over each other inside kind of the healthcare ops space. Nonetheless, though, we're not going to be able to do everything. And so we need the types of partners who have alignment philosophically. They understand the logic behind it. And then that way we can probably come up with better strategic planning and then go about executing in the marketplace as those partners. Or over time, partners can merge and do other things. So there's always that in play. There's, but more than anything, I think from a partnership standpoint is recognizing if there's someone that's best in industry or doing incredible work or offering incredible service, why go reinvent that? Especially when you want to get speed to solution, speed to outcomes, speed to improvements, and so forth. You've got to weigh all that in, and from that, if you're talking back to strategic planning, you really have to make sure you have a balanced approach. And you and I talk about the power of threes so many times, but it really is important to pick out 3 different determining factors that you can measure against, and then allow those to articulate you and point you into a sweet spot. And that's really what's helped guide a lot of what we either take on for ourselves, whether we build it or whatnot, or in those moments where it's super important to have that right partner at that right time.
Well, that's an interesting, I think leads to a question in my mind. Do you have in your mind, do you measure those individually, or do you have an overall strategy that you say, we're more of a de novo company where we're going to build it ourselves, or we're more of an acquisition based company, or we want a, a 70-30 split, or have you all had those discussions? Is that purposeful about your strategy, or is it more about an individual situation?
As of right now, we have not come up with kind of that, those hard boundaries on whether or not we're going to be, to your point, de novo, if we're going to go out and acquisition and so forth. Really, the driving factors initially are the mission. Is it a service that can scale to the independent community healthcare setting? That's first and foremost. And then from there, is it going to, drive value back to us as an organization, because we are for profit. And so we have to make very healthy business decisions, or we won't be in business very long to support our hospitals. If we're not healthy, we can't be a healthy partner for others. So we got to make sure that we're being good stewards of our own, financial state and health and so forth. And then also, does it allow us to have some innovation and stickiness to the market, like it's going to be around for a while, and that it anticipates some of those bends in the road? Those are really the three key determining factors. And those tend to point us towards, I think this is calling us, begging for us to buy this. I think this is probably telling us we're going to need to partner here because of who we see already in the industry meeting that need, or whether we're going to go and build it for ourselves.
Makes perfect sense. So what, on a more personal basis, one of the questions I like to ask and share with the class is kind of, what's your secret sauce, to the success that you've had? Is there one or two things that you say, you hear this, or maybe you've never heard this, but this is what's made me really feel like that I've differentiated myself and it's helped me in a significant way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll go back. I will say again, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier said than done sometimes, and we people we can get messy with each other, and relationships are hard, but stay relationship driven. But I think from a more again, going back to the a kind of a strategic asset that I try to bring is simplifying the solution, which sounds like, okay, of course, right? But there's a lot of complex solutions in all kinds of industries, maybe certainly some of the most complex in healthcare. And a lot of times people, whether they're inside the healthcare system as a provider, or whether they're a vendor or other, some other types of services company, those complex problems generate complex solutions. And oftentimes those complex solutions just create more complexity. And so simplifying the solution to meet those complex needs has been, I think, what, been the asset, or if you will, my forte, or has been my wheelhouse that I try to bring to the organizations. I always tease people and say, hey, 12/16 works as 3/4.
Yeah.
So let's bring this down. Let's make this 3/4, because we're trying to do 12/16 here. So let's reduce that fraction. Let's simplify this all the way down, because I think a 3/4 solution will meet the complex needs. And then we'll see how that begins to manifest itself from there. But we got to get to action. We got to make it work at a very simple, if not even small level sometimes. And then good, simple, small solutions, good and simple, small outcomes gain momentum. And then you start to see usually more exponential type growth than just linear growth.
Yeah, that reminds me, I have all these sayings that I have, and kind of, formulas, I guess you could say. But, one of them is I try to focus on what I call the 3 P's and 3 E's. The 3 P's are people, process, and product. Okay.
Right.
Which I think makes up every business. and the 3 E's are any initiatives that I'm involved in. I want it to be easy, efficient, and effective. Because if it's not easy, people won't start doing it. If it's not efficient, they won't continue to do it. And if it's not effective, we shouldn't be doing it, and what I'm always trying to come up with are things that I can operationalize.
Absolutely.
It's one thing to be able to accomplish something and successfully say, yes, we have done this. It's another to operationalize it that's going to have longevity.
Correct.
Whenever we put energy and focus on something in the immediate, sure, you can overcome just about any challenge for the immediate future, but can you sustain it? And sustaining it means that it has to be something that is operationally easier than it is to not sustain it. And that's, I think, to your point, is such an important component. It's not coming up with this, beautiful solution. The most beautiful solution is the easiest one.
That's absolutely right, without question. And to remember through that process, as I'm going to enter into pontification as opposed to just, but that, in that process, the processes are made for us. We're not made for the process.
Right.
So I love that you, on your P's, you start with people first.
Yeah, it has to be in that order.
Exactly. Simplify the solution and remember that it's working. It's there to lift up the people and not subject the people or not.
Well, and the funny thing that I had to experience, was that, when I first started teaching the 3 Ps, the people on my team, that I was fortunate enough to lead, they often said, well, this will make it easy for us. So that's the P. And I had to explain to them, no, you got that wrong. The P, the people part of P, is actually the people you're serving.
Right.
Not making it easier for you to do, making it easier for them, because in a lot of cases we would be implementing something that was going to hit thousands of people, and I said, the easiness has to be for the 1,000, because which is easier, for us to get the information correctly from the 1,000, or for it to be easier for you on your part but not have the information from the 1,000?
Right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And that's just the challenge. So I want to end with this question. Okay, so I know this about you, and you even your very first sentence, you indicated this in what you said, about, I guess that, that you ran out of really smart people, and you had to come to me, or something to that effect. I know you have a high dosage, and it's a priority for you around humility. And I know that is in part due to your commitment around your faith and your family, and making sure that you represent both of those things appropriately. So this is my final question, is about, talking about a strategy that really didn't work. Okay, that you went down a road and you truly believed it was going to work. And the reason I ask this and usually end with this is because, when students are doing things, they're reading in these textbooks, or, they're hearing these great stories about how this thing worked and that thing worked. And then all of a sudden, and, I think a lot of times they're not hearing that, hey, I failed more often than I really succeeded. And it was through those failures that I began refine myself, at least, and refine projects in a way from those experiences, and said, here's how I can do it better. And sometimes it wasn't the project or even the what we were going to do. It was honestly, in my case, early in my career, it was the way I went about doing it.
Right.
You mentioned the pull and push thing is a good example, about your hospital members. You really can't push them to do something. You have to attract them. You got to pull them in to, kind of your environment, and show them how it's going to really be successful for them and be a benefit for them. But, do you have a case that comes top of mind where you say, man, we thought this was going to be a home run and it just fizzled?
Yeah, there's probably too many to even, I mean, we could have spent the whole time on the mess ups, and, like they say, anyone smart will tell you always learn more from the tail kickings than the wins.
Yep.
And then, not to get too metaphoric here, but I guess that old line of, let's see, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Yep.
So
That's
there's a lot of
very
that.
true.
Yeah, going in, I think when you've seen it's Shark Tank 101, candidly.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
we were distributing products and we were blowing and going. And I thought, hey, with this growth, we need more space. We are this particular office and warehouse space is never going to hold all the business we're gonna be able to contain. Like this is, I want us to go ahead and bite a bigger chunk of this apple, go get some more operating space. We're going to bring in more product. We're going to buy more inventory. These shelves are going to be lined, and we're just going to start blowing this business out. And classic overextension, where there were some disruptions to the marketplace, and it created way more financial duress, operational challenges, issues with monthly overhead because of how big the space was and so forth. Just, yeah, completely overextended. We were managing our business really, really well in the limited space that we had. I could have done it more incrementally. I could have been a little bit more measured. And that's not to say that, you don't have a certain amount of risk in any business
And everything.
setting.
Yeah. Yep.
But sometimes haste makes waste.
Yep.
And so I had this big operational strategic plan on how all that growth was not only going to allow us to sell more of the products that we were already selling, but add more, and beefing up on these inventories was going to lower our cost. And to some extent, it did in the short term, but over the long run, it just way overextended us and put way too much duress on our accounts payable. Our accounts receivable really couldn't keep up with it. So we had to really weather a rough go there for a while. Then during that time, it kind of was a impediment to me executing on some other opportunities that could have really helped us, because I was so overextended in this area. I didn't have that agility to respond. And so what I don't think I understood then was what we talked about earlier. I needed to find those balance measurers that could kind of point me into a more cohesive and harmonious decision point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So again, hindsight is 2020. I learned a lot from it. I've taken it as a tremendous education. It put a year of major duress on myself and the organization and so forth. But like I say, I won't make that mistake again. And it's actually helped to inform the way I approach some of our strategic planning and the way we look at different services and how we might go about growing those services for QHR Health in a very measured, balanced way that says we got to, we have to be agile. We want to respond quickly, but we got to make sure that we don't over respond in such a way that overextends us or takes away and steals our ability to go and invest in or respond to an opportunity over here. So.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that, because, number one, I always appreciate when good leaders are willing to show their humility and the strength of that by giving an example of that. But, you hit on something that I think is hugely important, is understanding sometimes opportunity lost, because of something you did. And sometimes you got to keep availability of that within your resources so that you can apply it when that opportunity comes about, and you may not know what it is. right now.
That's exactly right.
Usually we frankly don't know. And there is a disruption, there's a pivot. Somebody calls you up and says, hey, I've got this, this thing going on here. What about this? And all of a sudden you say, wow, that's a great fit for what the need is for, our customers. That's what I should be doing. I should add that to our portfolio, but you got these 4 things and you should have only had 2.
That's right.
I can tell you that I deal with that. Heck, I'm dealing with that right now for my business, and saying, okay, how do I build this out in the right way? But at the same time, keep the quality that people expect when they're doing business with me, and that can sometimes be humbling when you're saying, okay, I need to reflect on that. So, well, Cort, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. You know how much I not only appreciate you, but respect what you do, and more importantly, how you do it. So thanks for taking time for the class and going through some of this stuff with us today.
Todd, feeling is mutual. You've taught me a lot, even in the meetings we've had over the last few years, and these students are blessed to be able to hear from you and the way you bring insights and experience and expertise. So I was humbled when you asked. So I hope somebody gets something decent out of it, then I'll feel happy about that.
Well, you already got that because I did. So I again appreciate it, Cort, and hope you have a blessed day today.
You too, Todd. Thanks again, man. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.